Yeah, man. Shout out to the Broken Arrow Tigers who are going to try to pull off their game in Broken Arrow on August 29th against Bentonville, and that's going to be on ESPN. So high school football is obviously going on in Oklahoma and parts of Texas, all over the parts of the country in patches. I want to get back to Big 12, and I want to talk about two things we know for certain, right? So everybody plays the weekend of September 26th, and everybody plays the weekend of December 5th. As the schedule is constructed today, every team gets 2 bye weeks. But there are some matchups here and some back-to-backs that I thought were interesting, right? So I want to throw some stuff at you. I want you to throw some stuff at me. Let's see what we found out individually from this schedule takeaway. So Baylor gets Oklahoma State and Texas in back-to-back. I don't know that that's the way I would have drawn it up if I was Dave Aranda this year. What do you think?
I wouldn't have drawn it up either, but I would take it a step further as something that I kind of took away from this as well. Not only do they get Oklahoma State and Texas back-to-back, they get TCU and Iowa State after that. And in my opinion, that's 4 of the top 5 teams in the conference all in a row.
Right.
And that's brutal because not only are we talking about no bye weeks in that span, but obviously Baylor's quarterback situation, you never know what kind of health issues could spring with Charlie Brewer. And they lose so many talented players, both offensively and defensively, to navigate that schedule after they play 2 cupcakes in week 1 and 2, KU and West Virginia. I mean, it's a real good chance that Baylor could see some stumbling in that 4-week stretch before they play Texas Tech right after that.
No, man, that's a very good point. We all expect those teams to compete for the Big 12 title. Texas Christian, Iowa State, Oklahoma, Texas, all of those teams, right? Baylor, we don't expect much from them this season because, 1, they lost a lot. 2, you have a wholesale change of staff. I mean, they were really fortunate to be able to hang on to Joey McGuire. I know that George Munoz is very talented, as is Larry Fedora, though we'll see how that goes. So I'll be interested. And with Charlie Brewer, you never know, right? Because he's like a concussion away from not playing football anymore. So you might have to see the Jacob Zener experience at some point in September, let alone for the rest of the season. Okay, so Kansas gets Iowa State, Oklahoma, a bye, and then Texas. It's not the worst stretch, but again, not the way that I would draw it up.
At least they get a little bit of a split between probably 2 of the top 3 in the Big 12, and then they'll have Texas at home, and then they'll have TCU right after that at home. So it's not exactly what you want, but at least they get to play one of the 2 powers within the conference in Lawrence, and then obviously they can stay right there and play a very good TCU squad. And when you look at Kansas, I mean, it's kind of tough. You open up with Baylor, you open up with Oklahoma State right after that. It's just not really an ideal slate for them because they hit West Virginia after a bye week, and that's really kind of the one break for them outside of maybe like Texas Tech to end the year. But even that's an away game. Again, if you're KU, you just kind of roll with your punches and you understand you're not competing for a title anytime soon. So at least you just take this thing with a grain of salt and you plan on playing those 2 powers, at least 1 at home, 1 away.
Iowa State going, man, look at or Kansas State, going Iowa State, Baylor, Texas. That could be actually, like, Kansas State, I think, has one of the tougher schedules, if not the toughest schedule in the Big 12 today with the addition of Arkansas State. What do you think? Because I think they end the season that way too. Iowa State, Baylor, and Texas.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Kansas State, it's going to be a gauntlet for the Wildcats this year because obviously they open up with Oklahoma. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the Sooners on a revenge game in that one. But then, I mean, Texas Tech, they get the Red Raiders at home, but then they have to go to TCU. And then you talk about that stretch. They get KU and West Virginia back-to-back, which I like for them. But then Oklahoma State bye, and then that 3-game stretch of Iowa State, Baylor, Texas. I mean, if Charlie Brewer stays healthy all the way through the season, you're talking about 3 of the better quarterbacks within the Big 12 going against you. And Kansas State isn't necessarily an offense that feels like it's going to put up a ton of numbers this year, although I think it could be a pretty good squad overall. So it's a stretch right there to end the year, but if they can navigate their way through it and take a game or 2, you have to like your chances in the bowl season.
Texas gets Tech, Texas Christian, and Oklahoma to start the season. I think they could catch 2 losses in their first 3 games. I think Tech's that good. I think Texas Christian's that good.
Yeah, TCU to me, if Texas is going to catch TCU at any point in the schedule, you would want it to be like week 1 or 2, right? Because, I mean, TCU, they're going to be fired up for that football game. And luckily, the Longhorns get them at home this year. And that's a big deal because I think if Duggan's able to take a step, and I'm sure we'll dive into this a little bit more, that offense for TCU has a chance to be special. And then you got Oklahoma right after that in Dallas, which, again, we should point out is in the Cotton Bowl. That's always a coin flip of the game. And so Texas Tech, I wouldn't be too terrified, although if Alan Bowman is healthy, I love him at quarterback. And then you go up against Duggan if he can figure it out in that offensive skill set. And then, of course, they won Spencer Rattler, who I think will prove to be a more talented quarterback than Tim Ellinger by the end of the year. Not how you wanted to draw it up to start the year for the Longhorns.
Okay, so I took like 3 pages of notes, but I did want to ask you, what other things did you pick up from this schedule release that just caught your eye?
Yeah, I feel like when you really just look through this thing, Oklahoma State, we should talk about the Cowboys, I'm sure, a little bit. Obviously, opening with West Virginia and Kansas, that's probably the most beneficial opening 2-week stretch, obviously, of any team within the conference. But then, I mean, like, I like how Oklahoma State's schedule is kind of spaced out, right? Obviously, they get the 2 cupcakes to open, which would make you think, okay, that's not great.
In addition to Tulsa.
Right. And Tulsa would probably be a little bit more of a daunting challenge if it were later in the year. But I like the fact that they get a bye week, right? And then they get Baylor, and then they Iowa State and Texas back-to-back. It terrifies you, right? But they get them both at home. And then you play KSU, who you can probably overpower offensively before you hit OU, kind of break with Texas Tech, and then TCU to end it. They have really tough games, but I like the fact that the 2 biggest, arguably, on the slate outside of Bedlam are back-to-back at home, so you can kind of feed off that momentum and energy. And then you get OU with a space before you play TCU at the end of the year, which I think could be a trap game for the Cowboys.
No, that's a great point. I just wanted to piggyback on that for just a second. The way that I talked about,
go ahead.
The way that I talked about perhaps the toughest schedule, right, being Kansas State, it looks like Oklahoma State might have the easiest road to the Big 12 championship, and that was something that you just basically nailed. And I'm with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. And then, I mean, I would honestly say, because we kind of touched base with a lot of these other squads, I want to just talk about TCU for a second, because the more we get closer and closer to the year, like, I'm tempted to pick them top 4 or 3, because I just keep convincing myself, like, they got a chance to put something together. Now, I don't like how they start the season with Iowa State and Texas. I think that's going to be 2 opening losses, and depending on how that team responds, it could derail the year. That being said, they get KSU at home and then a break before they play Oklahoma. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm picking them to beat OU, but then, like, they can kind of coast their way through all the way to the end of this season in playing Oklahoma State at home. So if we're being real with each other, like, even if they kind of hit those bumps in the road early, TCU could feed off of a very beneficial stretch where they have to play Baylor, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Kansas, and then an Oklahoma State game at home. If TCU surges towards the end of the season, anything could happen, obviously, later in the stretch, and the Horned Frogs could be benefiting from it. So while they do open up with a gauntlet at the beginning, that young TCU squad that has a ton of talent on both sides of the ball could easily hit its stride in a kind of a cupcake stretch towards the end and basically take headlines within the Big 12.
I would add to this, you have Zach Evans in the backfield now, which gives you somebody that your front or the other front 7 has to really recognize as a threat just from jump, right? You don't know who he is, Iowa State. You don't know who he is, Texas, except what you've seen on film, and that should scare you enough. So your front 7 already have to key on the tailback. Then you add Pro Wells at tight end and Tay Barber at wide receiver, and now all of a sudden I feel like you got something. Because if Max Duggan can actually operate in the way that he looked like he has the potential to operate, I mean, you could run Texas spread with him and have a lot of fun because, I mean, I'm not calling him Vince Young next to Cedric Benson. I am saying, however, that, like you said, if the game is in the balance like it was against Baylor last year, and remember Baylor won 11 games and played in the Sugar Bowl, he's got a year of maturity there, and he's got a better tailback. Like, they upgraded in such a big way. To say nothing of whether or not they are able to get Marcel Brooks eligible to play on the defensive side. So I'm with you. Like, Texas Christian is the one to watch, I think.
Okay. And I would like to further that real quick by saying, number one, J.D. Spielman, again, is going to be eligible this year, which is crazy to me. And then they'll have Tavalance Hunt, who I absolutely love. And that defense, man, like, okay.
Quentin Johnson. We forgot about Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson is another freshman wide receiver who could go absolutely bananas. They have, by the way, a really interesting young duo of running backs behind Zach Evans who kind of have the speed-power duo. But, I mean, like, then you look at the defense. If they get Brooks, like, Mark Jackson transfers from OU to TCU, I think he could do something. I'm a big Corey Bethley guy. Garrett Wallow is a linebacker who can carry that defense through the entirety of the season. And, obviously, they have arguably the two best safeties in the Big 12. Like, I keep convincing myself, especially if Spielman and Brooks and Evans are all on this roster together, they could be top three, man. Like, they can be a serious issue.
So the Iowa State fans are staring at us and just mugging the hell out of us going, I'm sorry, did you see Brock Purdy back there? He set a school record for passing in a season. Did you see Breece Hall back there? It's like one of the best freshman tailbacks from last year that nobody talked about. Did you know that John Haycock is still calling the defense? Okay. Did you know that we actually beat Texas too, along with Texas Christian? Like, I can see Iowa State fans just getting into their feelings over this, and I'm here for it, right? Because, again, I'm the guy saying maybe don't make dinosaurs, but we're in Jurassic Park now, so let's go with that. Did you have any other Big 12 takeaways?
I think that's about it, man. I would add to that Iowa State take that I still, if you made me pick a team in that like top 4 range, I would say that Iowa State gets the slight lean right now because at the end of the day, no matter how much talent TCU has or acquires in the transfer portal, I give them the advantage of Brock Purdy and Breece Hall. I love both of those guys, and Iowa State is easily a squad that can make serious noise and contend for the title this year.
Right on.